Hello, everybody. Welcome to the final stop of our cross-country Game Over tour, talking about the season that was, free agency. You got the gist. Vancouver's the last one. But, hey, I'm joined by Zach Clarke. Zach, let's talk Canucks.
The Canucks season, arguably the worst in the league comparative to expectations. I mean, coming into the year, you look at the analytics, for example, from Money Puck, had them at fourth best odds in the league to win the Stanley Cup. So to go from those kind of odds to then not even making the playoffs is a pretty brutal gut punch for Vancouver.
Especially when Vancouver lost to, or was lower in the standings than the Calgary Flames, who were predicted to be a bottom feeder in the league. Just a little salt in the wound. But
yeah, a little bit.
It's been an interesting offseason with a lot of talk about what this Vancouver Canucks team needs to be successful. There's been talks about a trade that went down in the offseason that some people are saying helped out in division, let alone in conference opponent. Let's get into that right now. Evander Kane, the newest member, well, he has a contract the rest of the guys don't that they just drafted, but newest member of the Vancouver Canucks, and after he gets jumped today.
Yeah, that was a pretty surprising piece of news coming out this morning. Obviously, wishing the best for him. From the reports that we've sounds like it wasn't at all his fault. So yeah, definitely wishing the best for his recovery. Tough way to start his Vancouver career. But yeah, it was certainly a trade that it was one of those trades that when I first saw it on social media, I thought it was a hoax. You know, people love to post fake trades on Twitter to get reactions. That's exactly what I thought it was, because it just seemed to not make a lot of sense for Vancouver. Although now that we've had a couple days to sit on it, I think that I'm probably higher on it than some of my other colleagues, especially here at Game Over. It's risky. There's no questioning it. But if you look at the upside, there is certainly some there. Over his last 82 regular season games, he has 31 goals. Now, I did say over his last 82 games because, as you well know, he barely played at all last year. In fact, he only played in the playoffs, zero regular season games played. So he is an injury-plagued player, but at his best, he is theoretically what the Canucks need. A power forward that's not afraid to get really physical and can score goals. The Canucks, especially as it sounds like going to lose Brock Boeser, need to find a way to replace some goals up and down the lineup, and Evander Kane could certainly do that. Now, of course, this is not without risk. The reason that people have been so hard on this deal so far is that you have bailed out a divisional rival. I mean, this was a hole in the ship that is the Edmonton Oilers, and you've just given them a bucket to start bailing out, taking on the full $5 million cap hit of Evander Kane. And not only that, but having to give up a fourth to get him definitely felt like a bit more of a price than, I was expecting Edmonton to have to give him away, / maybe even attach something to do it. And then, of course, you get into the whole possible off-ice thing. I'll say that people who are concerned about locker room issues, possibly given the seemingly fragile nature of Elias Pettersson, but his locker room issues, I mean, that was from one of his first years in the league. We haven't heard anything like that in about a decade's time. Now, off ice, obviously we've heard a lot of stuff, and a lot more recently than that. But when it comes to the locker room specifically, I am at least hopeful it won't damage the Canucks too much. But I mean, this is them swinging for the fences. And I'll tell you right now, it's either going to be a home run or they're going to be out.
Yeah, let's just not put his tracksuit anywhere near some showers. But anyways, you mentioned that likely going to lose Brock Boeser, and that's not the only name that I can remember. I'm just looking here. Center, you're also losing
Pius Suter, most
Pius
likely
Suter.
as well.
Yeah. It's going to be a tough addition.
He's going to be a big loss for Vancouver. Obviously, Brock Boeser is he's exactly what everyone thinks he is. 40 goal scorer, great in the playoffs. The heart of Vancouver, longest tenured player on the Canucks right now. I mean, I don't need to tell Vancouver fans and indeed hockey fans what kind of a player Brock Boeser is. So I'm going to spend more time talking about Pius Suter because I think that that's an underratedly huge loss. There is very, very few players in this league that can play both winger and center well. Not just filling in as a stopgap, but play it well. On top of that, we saw Pius Suter being forced into the top 6 for 20 games near the end of the year, and he was point per game in that time. He's so versatile. You can play him on absolutely any line on your team, and he will fit. Having that kind of versatility is something that the coach doesn't have to worry about night in, night out, because you can pencil him wherever and get results. Those kind of players are incredibly rare, and I think the Canucks will really miss Pius Suter, as it does sound like both Suter and Brock Boeser are likely going to be going to free agency. Nothing, of course, 100% confirmed till July 1st, but that's what it sounds like as of now.
Yeah, so that takes us to the 2025 NHL draft, where the Canucks' first pick out of the nearby Seattle Thunderbirds, Braden Coots, another center, kind of projects to be, if everything goes perfectly correct, that 2C that can maybe play as a 1C in certain scenarios.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt. I was just going to say that I think that you're right. That's exactly what he is. I don't want people to be setting their hopes kind of too high, but I also think that what I really like about this Canucks pick is that he seems to have one of the highest floors of a prospect. So he might not have the ceiling of an elite first line center, but I would be absolutely gobsmacked if he at least doesn't turn into some sort of an NHL player for Vancouver. On top of that, the leadership characteristics, was named a captain in the WHL at an incredibly young age. In fact, is still, after already having to see for a year, one of the youngest captains in the WHL. So to have that kind of leadership ability from such a young age, on top of that, close to point per game, right shot center. This was a draft where the Canucks really did try to fill that positional need. They need centers. They need as many as they can get. Well, they drafted 5, so you got to hope at least one will end up becoming an NHL caliber player.
But then you do see in the second round a little bit of a reach by most draft boards. Alexei Medvedev, the London Knights goaltender. A lot of people had him ranked outside the top 100, let alone within the top 50 where he was drafted. And considering the situation for the Canucks, that a lot of people looking on the outside of the market, looking into Vancouver, are saying, you've already got a goaltending logjam at the top. Why you're adding another goaltender into that system? It seems like that was maybe just them taking the highest guy on their draft board, regardless of how everyone else felt about the pick.
Well, so interestingly enough about Alexei Medvedev, because you're right, a lot of the public boards, i.e. from the scouts, from the figures in the media that we saw, you're right, had Alexei Medvedev ranked a lot lower. However, since the draft, we've actually heard that a lot of internal boards for NHL teams had him ranked a lot higher than the public data might suggest. A lot of teams were quite high on Alexei Medvedev. And I think for good reason. 6'2" mobile goaltender. He has the tools to become an NHL regular. Now, you make a good point about the Canucks logjam in goaltending, but I actually think that logjam is exactly why they needed to add another quality prospect goaltender in this draft. And the reason that I say that is the Canucks are in a position right now where they pretty much have to trade one of those goaltenders. Artur Shilov's being the most likely one to be departing, in my humble opinion. He now is no longer able to be sent up from the NHL to AHL without waiver claim. He has to go through that process. There's a 100% chance he would get claimed if he goes through the waiver claim. 100%, no doubt in my mind. So because of that, you then either need to have him as your regular NHL backup, or you need to bury him in the AHL. And neither of those seem like a tantalizing prospect for the Vancouver Canucks, who already have 2 NHL caliber goaltenders in Kevin Lankinen and Thatcher Demko. And from the reports that we've heard, Lankinen already locked up long-term. Demko, it sounds like they're trying to pursue that extension as well. So putting the pieces together, it does seem like Shilovs is likely to be traded, and then you do want to have some more prospects that have legitimate chances at the NHL level. I still like some of the guys in Abbotsford. Nikita Tolopilo has some upside. Ty Young has probably a little bit more upside, but also a little bit more growing to do. Mm-hmm. And then whichever one of those can make it to the NHL level, you replace that spot with Alexei Medvedev, who I am quite high on. I think he really could become something at the NHL level. So I think that it's a pick that, while it raised some eyebrows, it does make sense.
So I'm just double checking. You mean Calgary Canucks legend Ty Young in the system?
Of course.
I love Younger. Anyways, but let's look to free agency, because the Canucks are going to have to be active. Well, they don't have to worry about goaltending. In fact, as we mentioned, going to have to likely ship off one of the 3 NHL caliber guys. There are going to be some holes that are going to need to be filled. I don't think it's going to be a single guy that replaces Brock Boeser. I don't think it's going to be a single guy that replaces Pius Suter. And it's especially going to be harder to replace Suter because it is such a narrow center market this year. There's not a lot of top tier options.
No, there really isn't. And that's the thing is the Canucks are in a bit of a dilemma here. They don't have the most cap space in the world. And realistically, if we're talking about trying to compete for an actual Stanley Cup championship as opposed to just squeaking into the playoffs, they're going to need to add two top six forwards. Not one, but two. And the most important will definitely be that second line center. There's no question that's exactly what the Canucks are after. And right now, the options are thin. I mean, if you have a look, right, it looks like Mikael Granlund's probably the best option. And I like him, but if he's your 2C, do you feel good about competing for a Stanley Cup with Mikael Granlund as your second line center? Probably not. But it's a really thin market, which makes me think that the Canucks are more likely to pursue a trade option. Now, from the rumors we've heard, it sounds like right now the Canucks are really trying to go after Bowen Byram out of Buffalo, which makes absolutely zero sense to me. It's one of those things that reminds you that, you know what? Your view as a media is definitely different than the views that front offices have. Because to me, I just can't see the fit for Bowen Byram here. You'd have to ship out one of your top defensive prospects or players. Now, that is the one advantage that the Canucks do have right now, is that I would argue that their defensive core up and down is a top 5 in the league. At the very least, top 10, closing in on top 5. It's incredibly deep. You could afford to have a few guys injured and still be fielding a very competent NHL defensive core. So because of that, you do have some trade pieces to work with. You can afford to lose top prospect Tom Willander or someone like defenseman Elias Pettersson, although I'd hate to lose him, or Victor Mancini, or even Kirill Kudryavtsev. Some other guys in Abbotsford have some value right now, especially after winning the Calder Cup. So not all hope is lost. I think that they're more likely to be able to solve these issues through trades than free agency, however, given that it's a very poor free agent class.
Yeah, but we have, as much as Calgary and Vancouver are rivals on the ice, we kind of have a similar system where we need to worry about, okay, this is all well and good, but what do the Aquilinis and what does the ownership of the Calgary Flames Sports and Entertainment Group think? Does that cause any stress for you? Because there's a lot of people online, not necessarily with media credentials, but we're saying, was this Aquilini bringing in Kane? Is this him trying to assert more of a thumbprint on the squad from the ownership box?
Well, there's no question that Aquilini and Kane, he I don't know whether you get an official hand, but he's well liked. Aquilini does very much like Evander Kane as a player, and by the sounds of it, as a person as well. I think he's always had a hand in the team. Anyone who's a Canucks fan knows that Aquilini does have his thumbprint on the team. To what extent, we'll never know. We never will. But it is quite possibly a chance. However, it does at least make enough sense that I don't hate the move. Right now, the Canucks' interests are aligned with Aquilini. For a long time, rebuilding for this team was really difficult because Aquilini, as an owner, is someone that always really just wants to make the playoffs. I don't think that he's necessarily too worried about having that long-term playoff success, more so just making it to the playoffs.
Let's go get that 2 games of playoff revenue, right?
Exactly. But at least for this coming year, that's what the Canucks need to do, is make the playoffs. This is the year of trying to convince Quinn Hughes to stay. And to do that, you're going to have to prove that you're a competitive team. So right now, their interests are at least well aligned with the ownership group. So I'm not too worried about that going forward to this year.